Hi, ladies and gentlemen. I am Morris Merriweather, the host of Straight Talk in Room 503, and also the author of Enough is Enough. I stand on the campus of Southside High School, one of our older high schools. You remember on last week, we talked about the closing of an inner city school because this was predominant African American. But I want you to join me as we tour the campus where the medical program was moved from the inner city school to this campus. I want you to see this campus this week. Ladies and gentlemen, the same thing that is happening in your hometown is happening in my hometown, is happening in your hometown. To give you a prime example, just 73 miles from here to a high school called George Washington Carver High School, another African American high school. They are meeting last week and will be meeting again this week. And they're talking about the closing of another inner city high school. Ladies and gentlemen, ask yourself, why are we closing only the inner city high schools and leaving other schools open? Something is not right. But join me as we tour this campus in my hometown. And then when you look at this hometown and you look at the schools that are closing, look at the school that is closing in your hometown. Ladies and gentlemen, public education has spiraled out of control. Join me as we tour this campus. Ladies and gentlemen, I stand beside a sign. And this is the class of 1960. This school has been here a while. If you remembered on last week when we talked about the flagpole at the inner city school that was rusted out, was allowed to rust out. I would like for you to tour to see the flagpole behind me. Ladies and gentlemen, if you can find some rust on that, I'll buy you a brand new car. What is the difference in making sure that things look good out south, but things look bad north? It's only because those in the east allowed it to happen in the east. Those in the south had decided we will not tolerate that. Our school will be kept up. But ladies and gentlemen, even with all the keeping up, this school is still in disarray and in need of some maintenance. But students are willing to come here because this school is out south. Let's tour. Ladies and gentlemen, as we continue to tour Southside School, I'm at the front entrance, and I want you to see it is in need of some painting, and we'll get a little bit closer, that you can see that there is also some painting that needs to be done here. But students are willing to still come here. Let's continue the tour. Ladies and gentlemen, I want you to see right close up. Look at the old shades that's on this school where the new medical program will be beginning this fall. There is a need of paint. Ladies and gentlemen, this right here is not snow. This is peeling paint, where the system has refused to keep up the buildings, but yet they want to build new schools and not taking care of the old schools that they have. Let us continue the tour. Ladies and gentlemen, we are now in front of the fine art. These are things that out east we weren't able to show you. I was not able to show you a building of fine art. But ladies and gentlemen, I can show you a building that was being closed. Ladies and gentlemen, this time someone rolled up the sleeves like I am doing and tell the unadulterated truth. We have been silent too long. It's time for a revolution in public education. We work too hard, pay our tax money too long for us to accept second-class citizenship. Ladies and gentlemen, this bill is in need of repair, just like the closing of the inner city JCM. But the difference is there's a different clientele out here. There's a different people that in this community, they will not allow this school to be closed. Ladies and gentlemen, one of the most distinguishing principles that we've had in the school system was once principal of this school. And they are not going to allow this school to close because the people that are around this community, there is no glass in the street, paper everywhere. Ladies and gentlemen, these people take pride in their community, and they are not about to allow less than 15 people to determine where their children will go to school. So they'll move the medical school out here. And ladies and gentlemen, they're waiting on the early college high school. They waited for it to come to this campus. And we're going to sit back and allow that to happen. They're going to spend nearly $1 million to try to make sure that we do a pony and dance show to make us believe that they're going to have an early college high school in East Jackson at a predominant black school. But at the same time, the same people who would not go to that school, what make you think they're going to come to early college high school? Then they'll come back and tell you, we're going to have to close that school because of low enrollment. Ladies and gentlemen, the same reason that they're closing JCM, or they have closed JCM, is the same reason they're using in Shelby County, Memphis, Tennessee. They're saying that poor academic and low enrollment, they're busting black students out so they can close the school because certain students don't want to attend. And you sit back every week, sitting on your Humpty Dumpty, not saying anything, and our kids are going to prison. Our boys are dying in the street, and we're not saying nothing, but isn't that bad? Ladies and gentlemen, you have turned your back on some of the students of this city. Some of you have not done so, but to tell me that if you're silenced, it may mean that you're going along with the status quo. Ladies and gentlemen, join me as we head over to the stadium that the inner city high school was promised that one will be built as long with a school. Let's travel. Ladies and gentlemen, we're here at the Southside Stadium. Ladies and gentlemen, this is, we're in Hawk Country, Southside. Ladies and gentlemen, but when it came down to the school at JCM was, they did not have a stadium. They had to either go to Rock Stadium, approximately a mile or so away to practice, or go to the adjacent college and pray on their field. But this school, along with the other high school, Northside, got their own stadium. Liberty got their own stadium. Ladies and gentlemen, everyone has their own stadium, but the predominant black school. And you, my friends, and my neighbors, you all sit still and allow the powers to be and the good old boys and the Board of Education to decide where they would spend your tax money. And ladies and gentlemen, our system is in disarray. What are we going to do? Ladies and gentlemen, it's time for us to stand up, roll up our sleeves, get busy. Do not allow people to determine what happens to a generation of children, our boys and our girls. And they're not all black. Ladies and gentlemen, if you think that I'm talking about only black students, we're talking about poor kids. There are poor whites that are attending school along with the poor blacks. We're talking about the Mexicans, the Latinos. They are there too. They have no voice. Ladies and gentlemen, if it's the last thing that I do, I will be a voice for those who cannot speak. I will be a voice in this community because I know it's not right. Ladies and gentlemen, they tell me that you do better if you know better. I'm wondering about that now because there are some people that know better, but they're not doing better because they're just sitting still. They're afraid to speak out. Ladies and gentlemen, this is my hometown. I'm going to make sure that I stand up and take a stance. I will not be quiet. I will not be satisfied with nothing. Ladies and gentlemen, our kids deserve more than this. You can go to church all you want to, but if you're not willing that when the benediction is given to get out in the community and do that which is right, ladies and gentlemen, that's wrong. Where is our religious community? Ladies and gentlemen, this is not about the religious black community. The white religious community are quiet too. When I asked one of the white people that was attending one of the churches that I stopped by, they said to me, "Do you really want me to tell you the truth?" I said, "Sure, don't want to lie." Well, Mr. Meriwether, a lot of the students who are here at our churches, that they're going to private school. So you mean to tell me that they're not concerned about students unless, oh my goodness, this is bad. So if they are in their church and they are of the white persuasion, then that's fine because they're going to private school. But I don't care about the children of color and the poor white kids. But yet I'm planning on going to heaven. Ladies and gentlemen, they're going to be only standing room only in hell. Don't be one of them. Join me as we continue to talk about public education and tell the truth. Next week we'll deal with some issues, but I just wanted you to see the comparison of what's going on in my hometown and your hometown. If they're closing it in Madison County and they're closing one in Shelby County, they have closed several in Chicago, it's coming to a city near you. I'm your host, Morris Merriweather, Straight Talking Room 503, and the author of Enough is Enough. Ladies and gentlemen, haven't you had enough? Join me again in 503. We'll see you next week. Take care until then. Remember, public education is spiraling out of control.